Hello friends, welcome again to Physio eLearn, and I'm back with the fourth part of short answer questions. In this video we are going to focus basically on the basic physiology of the cardiovascular system. I'm Dr. Varun and let's get started. The first question, myocardial oxygen consumption, or it is abbreviated as MVO2. An increase in the systemic oxygen demand, that is during the exercises, requires an increase in the myocardial oxygen demand. Now, myocardial oxygen supply is dependent upon three factors. The first one is delivery of the oxygenated blood through coronary arteries, the oxygen carrying capacity of the arterial blood, and the ability of the myocardial cells to extract oxygen from the arterial blood. Now, the myocardium is routinely very efficient in extracting oxygen from its blood supply. Therefore, during the time of increased demand, very little further extraction can occur. So, the primary mechanism for increasing the myocardial oxygen supply during the time of increased demand or during exercises is by an increased coronary blood flow. So, there is a linear relationship between the coronary blood flow and the myocardial oxygen demand. So, if the myocardial oxygen demand increases, there has to be an increase in the coronary blood flow. So, during exercise, the coronary blood flow may increase 5 times above the resting level, which explains the linear relationship between the coronary blood flow and the myocardial oxygen demand. Myocardial oxygen demand, or MVO2, can be clinically assessed by a product of heart rate and systolic blood pressure. It is also known as rate pressure product. So, rate pressure product is the multiplication of heart rate and the systolic blood pressure. Next question. Explain Starling length tension relationship in relation to myocardium. It is also known as Starling's law. Starling length tension relationship combines the properties of diastole and systole. So, as the muscle length increases, that is, the ventricular chamber size increases during the diastole, the ability of the myocardium to generate the contractile force during the systole is increased up to a point. This is very important, up to a point. Beyond certain point, the muscle becomes actively insufficient with a resultant decrease in the contractile force, owing to the inadequate coupling of the actin myosin. So, with the increase of the length of the muscle, can increase the force of contraction to a certain point, and if you further increase the length of the muscle, the force of contraction is going to reduce. So that is what is the Starling law. So if the ventricle is impaired in its diastolic properties, the myocardial function will get diminished. So too little compliancy, such as in pericarditis or diabetes, where the LV becomes stiff, or too much compliancy in where the muscle becomes dilated, abnormally dilated, that is in cardiomyopathy, then again the LV function is going to affect. So even if the muscles become stiff during the diabetes or pericarditis, or if the muscles are too much dilated, then in both the condition the LV is going to affect the function of the LV. So we can explain it in more better way in this diagram. You can see in the first condition, the actin myosin filament are overlapping each other. In the first condition, the actin myosin filament is overlapping each other. So you can see in this, the vertical axis is the tension of the muscle generated. Okay, so if you can see, the A is referring to the ascending limb of this graph. So the myocardial tension, the tension in the muscle is increasing, but it is not still optimum. In B, there is optimal length tension relationship in the actin myosin filament. So the contraction, you can see it has reached its optimum or the maximum contraction. But in the C condition, where the length is too much increased, then there is fall in the contraction or the tension of the muscle. And if you can see D, there is complete reduction in the tension of the muscle. So the optimal condition, that is the B length tension relationship, is the best. So the A can be because of the pericarditis or the diabetes, that is in the ascending limb. There is no optimal tension, and C and D can happen in cardiomyopathies. So this is the length tension relationship or the Starling law, where up to a point the length tension relationship can work, and after certain point, if you further increase the length of the muscle, then there is fall in the contraction or the force of contraction of the muscle. So that is the Starling law. Question number 3, cardiac output and stroke volume. The amount of blood that leaves the ventricle per minute is known as cardiac output. It is expressed in liters per minute. It is influenced by heart rate and stroke volume. The cardiac output is influenced by heart rate and stroke volume. The stroke volume is the amount of blood that is ejected with each myocardial contraction and is influenced by 3 factors. Now, stroke volume is influenced by 3 factors. The first is the preload, second is the contractility, and the third is the afterload. So the preload is the amount of blood in the ventricle to contract during the diastole. Okay, so during the diastole, the blood is already there in the ventricle and the ventricle starts contracting, so that is the preload. The contractility, the ability of the ventricle to contract, and the afterload is the force of the left ventricle must generate during the systole to overcome the aortic pressure and to open the aortic valve. So that is the afterload. So that is about cardiac output and stroke volume. Fourth question, cardiac index. Clinically, especially in critical care settings, the concept of cardiac index is often preferred to cardiac output. The cardiac index is the relationship of cardiac output to the body surface area. The cardiac index provides a more complete assessment of specific individuals' perfusion capability. Like for example, in comparing 6 foot tall individual and 5 foot tall individual, each with cardiac output 3 liters per minute, the 5 foot tall person will have better tissue perfusion because the cardiac index is higher, of course. Okay, the 6 foot tall individual will have less tissue perfusion because the body surface area of a 6 foot individual will be more than that of the body surface area of the 5 foot tall individual. So that is cardiac index. So it is a ratio of cardiac output to body surface area. Question number 5, ECG waves and electrical conduction of the heart. Electrical conduction can be viewed via electrocardiogram, that is ECG complex. Each component of the complex reflects a certain phase of the conduction pathway. Like P wave depicts SA node and atrial depolarization, sinus node and atrial depolarization. PR segment demonstrates the conduction through the AV node. The QRS complex denotes the electrical flow through the ventricles causing ventricular depolarization. ST segment describes the initiation of the ventricular repolarization, and the T wave indicates complete ventricular repolarization. So you can see in this figure where you can see the SA node and the atrial depolarization is P wave. The ventricular depolarization is QRS complex. The PR segment is the AV node, and the T wave is the ventricular repolarization. So that is the relationship between the electrical conduction of the heart and the ECG. PQRST, the ECG complex. Next, what is normal sinus rhythm? In normal sinus rhythm, the impulse begins in the SA node and travel through the atria, the AV node, the bundle of His, Purkinje fibers, septum and the ventricle. Each ECG complex represents one cardiac cycle or one heartbeat. In a series of ECG complex representing sinus rhythm, each QRS complex is preceded by a P wave, and QRS complex should be equally placed apart. indicating a regular rhythm. So the RR interval, the duration between the two R waves should be equal to say that it is a normal sinus rhythm, and the P wave should always precede the QRS complex. These two conditions should be fulfilled for normal sinus rhythm. Question number 8, chronotropy and inotropy. A stimulation of beta receptors by sympathetic neurotransmitter norepinephrine or noradrenaline increases the overall activity of the heart by increasing the rate. So increasing in the heart rate is known as chronotropy, and the force of contraction. If the force of contraction increases, then it is known as inotropy. So if the beta receptor gets stimulated by a neurotransmitter norepinephrine or noradrenaline, there is increase in the overall activity of the heart by heart rate, that is chronotropy, and by force of contraction, that is inotropy. Next question, right heart catheterization. So common sites for invasive monitoring in a clinical setting are right atrium, pulmonary artery, pulmonary capillary. To assess the filling pressure via a right heart catheterization. So as you can see, the CVP, the central venous pressure, the normal range is 0 to 8 mm of Hg. So central venous pressure is measured as soon as you are entering the catheter from the subclavian vein or internal jugular vein inside through the superior vena cava inside the right atrium. Okay, so once you enter the superior vena cava or you are in the jugular vein, you measure the CVP, and the normal range is 0 to 8 mm of Hg. The right atrial pressure, so once you enter the right atrial over here, there you measure the right atrial, and the mean is 0 to 8 mm of Hg. And once you enter the right atrium and you enter the right ventricle and you enter the pulmonary artery over here, there you measure the pulmonary artery pressure. So the systolic pulmonary artery pressure is 20 to 25 mm of Hg, diastolic is 6 to 12 mm of Hg, and the mean pressure is 9 to 19 mm of Hg. Then you further move the catheter from the pulmonary artery and you wedge it in the pulmonary capillary. So then it is known as the pulmonary capillary wedge pressure, and the normal is 6 to 12 mm of Hg. So in right heart catheterization, you can measure 4 pressures, that is the CVP, that is 0 to 8 mm of Hg, the right atrial pressure, that is 0 to 8 mm of Hg again, the pulmonary artery pressure, systolic is 20 to 25 and the diastolic is 6 to 12 mm of Hg, and the mean pressure is 9 to 19 mm of Hg, and pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is 6 to 12 mm of Hg. 10th and the last SAQ, ejection fraction. The ejection fraction is a clinically useful measure for LV function, that is the left ventricle function. The ejection fraction is the relationship between the stroke volume and the left ventricular end diastolic volume. So it is the volume in the left ventricle at the end of the diastole. So it can be calculated by stroke volume divided by left ventricular end diastolic volume. So normal ejection fraction is 50 to 75%, which means that in each contraction of LV, 50 to 75% of the volume of the blood that was in the left ventricle at the end diastole has been ejected into the aorta during the systole. So half to 3/4 amount of blood is ejected in each systole from the left ventricle. So the normal range of ejection fraction is 50 to 75%, and it is calculated by stroke volume divided by left ventricular end diastolic volume. Ejection fraction is measured using echocardiography. So dear friends, all these questions what I have taken is from the Physical Rehabilitation Assessment and Treatment O'Sullivan 4th edition, and the page number is from 471 to 483. So if you are liking my videos of this question answer or short answer question, kindly subscribe to my channel and share the videos or share my channel to maximum students so all of them can get benefited before their exams. Thank you so much.